What shall I use for whiskers on my needle felted animals? In this video, I'll compare 7 materials so you can decide which is the best for you. I'll demonstrate how to attach whiskers to my Tabby Birman head because this is the 5th and final part of the Tabby Birman cat head series. I'll explain my personal pros and cons for each of the materials, and I'll even share my top 3 favourites out of them all. First of all, I'd like to mention Heidifeathers, who are kindly sponsoring this video. They are a friendly, dedicated felting shop with all the wool and tools you'll need for your needle felted animals. They're UK based but deliver worldwide. I especially love their colour coded needles. The horsehair I show you later on is from their shop, so do check out their website today at heidifeathers.com. Here's the interesting biological bit. Whiskers are the cat's superpower of sensory awareness. The proper term is vibrissae, originating from the Latin word vibrio, which means to vibrate. Highly sensitive hair follicles are full of nerves to feel objects around them, but also to sense changes in air currents, helping them see better in the dark. Did you know that cats have 24 whiskers around the nose, 12 on each side, 4 rows of 3? They also have some on the eyebrows to protect the eyes, behind the jawline, and even on their forelegs. So here are the 7 materials. The first one is a cotton embroidery or sewing thread. You can either buy them as a single strand on a reel like this, or with some of the embroidery threads they come with several strands all together and you can just pull them apart for the thickness that you want. The second is a stiffened cotton thread. It keeps its hold better. It's not going to go so floppy against the cat's face. You can purchase this thread already stiffened, or you can do this yourself. So I'm getting a piece of my thread. You want it slightly longer than it's going to go threaded through both sides. Simply take some PVA glue, add it to same part water, like so, and give it a really good mix. And all you do is pop your thread into it, make sure it's well soaked in, remove any blobs and leave it somewhere to dry. When comparing the two then, the bottom one is the original. It's quite floppy, doesn't really keep its shape. And the other one is a lot more stiff. You can even kind of bend it and fashion it with your fingers to make it do little curls and waves. There we go. The third one is a fishing line, or you could use a jewelry beading wire. So I sourced mine really cheaply online. It's 0.4 millimeters thickness, which is a great thickness for whiskers. It's really long on this spool. You get masses of it, and it's really see-through. Rather than being of a colour, it's clear. It's made of nylon and it's really strong. The fourth one to compare is the paintbrush bristle. I got this decorator's brush from a hardware store really cheaply. Masses of bristles on there. You can actually use the darker ones for dark whiskers and light ones for your lighter whiskers, which is great. These bristles are synthetic, but you can buy animal hair bristles. The end can be a little bit frayed, so you just need to snip that off. And so all you need to do then is snip it off at the base. And there we have your whisker made out of bristle. Please subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon for more free and useful tutorials just like this. So the fifth one then is horsehair. And as I mentioned earlier, I got this one from Heidifeathers. But you could source this from a friend who has a horse, or if you've got your own horse, even better. The individual hairs are fairly long, they're very natural looking. They can bend fairly easily, which can be good, but it can also mean it's fairly brittle as well. For dark whiskers, you'll need to go for a darker breed of horse. As long as you carefully do it, you can manipulate the hair with your fingers to bend it and make it wavy and curly. You can also use heated hair tools to bend it too. In my pack I had some fairly thin ones and also some thicker ones, so you can choose which thickness you want depending on your animal. At number 6 we have the feather shaft. The biological term is rachis. I'd heard in some of the felting groups that you can simply use feathers for your whiskers, so I bought some beautiful feathers. Look at these. The bit that we need to get to is the very centre part, so we need to move the outer bits away from that centre line, which is the shaft or the rachis. There were loads in my pack of varying sizes, so you'll need to think about what size you want for the animal that you're making. You can also go around collecting feathers that have fallen naturally from local birds. Give them a really good wash though, of course. Our black chicken at the moment has been molting, so that will make some great dark whiskers. So you'll need to very carefully tear away the barbs, the fluffy bits, from the shaft on either side. Be very careful not to break the shaft as you're doing this. This is quite a process and will take a little bit of time, and it's quite fiddly, but in the end you'll get a beautiful whisker shape. And lastly then is a real cat's whisker. I'm very excited to show you these. A very kind follower sent me her real Tabby Birman cat whiskers. They're so beautiful, and she's very patiently collected them all that have fallen out naturally from the cats. So here they are, lovely tapered one end, really strong for the material that it is. They're very thick at the base. There's lots of different sizes and thicknesses, so I'm going to be sorting those out in a bit. I can't wait to add these to my needle felted cat head. What I particularly love about the cat's whisker is that you don't need to create any hole to add it to your cat. You simply push it in and it stays in place. Look at that. It's so sharp, that end. Again, I'm just going to pop one in to the eyebrow area. It stays in. It's not going to fall out, but of course if you pull it, it will pull out. You'll notice that the curve of the whisker has to go in the right direction, so you might want to twist it round once you've popped it in there. The tools that you'll need for attachment of your whiskers. If threading, you'll need a needle. This needs to be long enough to go through the cat's head. You'll need some scissors and some glue. I use a toothpick to add the glue and a card to put the glue on, an awl and a barb needle if you're not threading the whisker. Sewing whiskers. I'll be showing you how to sew whiskers into the whisker pad area of my cat head. But cats also have whiskers at the side of their faces, around the eyebrow areas, but I'll just be showing the whisker pads at this point. Threading whiskers is great because you can do 2 whiskers at least in one swoop. So with the cotton thread, I'm going through from one side and coming out the other. You want to get as symmetrical as possible. I like to go at a diagonal. So you're pulling it through. This is with the stiffened thread. I'm not going to show you the normal thread because it's really too wobbly. I always go a little bit longer than I need because I might want to trim or bend it into shape a bit later, and then give it a trim. You can then bend the whisker slightly with your fingers, get it to where you want it to be, like so. The fishing line was quite difficult to get through the eye of my needle. It's quite thick and tough. And then going through the head of my cat was also quite a tough thing, as you will see. I had to really wiggle it to get it through. But once through, it's threaded well, and I can then bring it to the length I want and snip. The horsehair was nice and thin to go through the needle. It's quite delicate, so you have to be really careful when threading it. Just pulling through just directly across this time to the other side. You can then move it with your fingers and bend it to get it into the shape that you want it to be. You can already see that the stiffened thread has slightly lost its hold there. They all look pretty good for whiskers though so far. To fix your whiskers in place, use the tiniest blob of glue on your toothpick. Pull out the whisker slightly on one side. Administer the glue with the blob directly to the whisker. And then pulling through from the other side, bringing the glue into the join between the whisker and the whisker pad. Then, once that's in place, take a tiny blob of glue and add it to the very base of that whisker on the other side. This stops the whisker from falling out or being pulled out easily. Attaching whiskers that can't be threaded, so the bristles and the feather shaft will need to be added one by one. I'm using a thick barbed needle to make a hole, but sometimes you'll need to go a little bit thicker than that, so this is where an awl will come in use. An awl is very sharp and thin one end, and as you push it in, it gets thicker and thicker up the length of the awl, so you can wiggle it and make a really nice hole. It only needs to be a few millimeters deep. There you go. I'm very simply taking the end of my brush bristle, putting into the glue just a tiny amount, and then I can fix it in by popping it into that hole. Push it carefully deep into that hole, and then hold it for a few moments so that the glue takes. This whisker is bending a bit too far forward, so I simply bend it at the base. I'm now making a hole for the feather. It's actually a bit thicker, this one. The thickness of the base of the feather is a lot thicker, I've noticed, than all the other materials. So quite a deep, big hole there. Now the whisker, I didn't need to make a hole. I just simply added a bit of glue to the base, and the sharpness of that base is going to go straight into the wool. Hold it for a bit, and there we go. So we've got all of those whiskers, all different materials, but looking great. Which material will you use for whiskers? Please let me know in the comments below. Now, interestingly, once I got the whiskers on, I noticed that the real whisker has a real kind of vibrating bounce to it. So I went through the others to see how they felt. Only the horsehair and the brush bristle looked and felt the same way. But of course, the choice is completely up to you. Here are my pros and cons of each of the materials, and I'll highlight my 3 top favourites. I've made it clear which are the vegan options if that is important to you. A cotton thread then is easy to find in shops or online, easy to thread and manipulate, comes in a variety of colours and thicknesses. The material looks natural like a whisker and is vegan friendly, but compared to other materials it's less realistic in shape and hold even when stiffened, and unless buying it already stiffened, this can take some time and effort to do this yourself. Fishing line or jewellery wire is very strong and can be threaded. It's vegan friendly. Less realistic though, as it looks synthetic and shiny. It's not quite the right shape for a whisker and can be difficult to get the right colour. It's quite tough to thread. A synthetic brush bristle is also strong, looks like whiskers in colour and shape, is vegan friendly. A bit of effort though to find the right colour and length of bristle, and that length could be a challenge for larger projects. But the pros for me far outweighed the cons, so the brush bristle is the third in my top 3. The horsehair looks and feels like a whisker in texture, colour and movement. You can manipulate it into shape and it can be threaded. It's slightly fragile though when threading and can weaken and break if bending, and is not vegan friendly. But I absolutely love horsehair and it is my second favourite of my top 3 for whiskers. The feather shaft is a great idea as it resembles the whisker shape. It's thick at the base and tapers towards the other end. But for me, it took a lot of effort. It was fiddly to prepare when removing the barbs. It's not so easy to find the right size where the base doesn't look too thick. It could break quite easily when manipulating, and it's not vegan friendly if that's important to you. And lastly, we have the real cat whiskers, and of course, being the real thing, it's going to look right in size and shape and feel. and that lovely surprise of it being sharp at one end, no need to then make a hole, very strong in structure. Now, the only downside really is that you have to have a cat or a friend with cats and having to wait very patiently for the whiskers to drop. And they're from an animal, so they're not vegan friendly. But for me, the cat whisker came top in first place of my favourite materials. You can't get better than a real cat whisker to make realistic cat whiskers. So here I am adding all of those lovely real cat whiskers to my Tabby Birman head. And thank you so much to the lovely lady that gave me all these whiskers. Whatever material you decide to use, I hope you have so much fun adding them. And here he is with his whiskers on. I hope you found this tutorial useful. You might want to watch this one next.